The awkward part starts before any execution even happens. The town hires the man. Officials send for him. His pay comes through legal channels. He is part of the machinery everybody insists is necessary. But then he has to go buy bread, or stand near a well, or walk through the market, and people act like he brought the scaffold with him. That was the contradiction he lived inside all the time. He was not some outlaw hiding in the woods. He was the person the court officially needed. Orders came down from magistrates. A date was fixed. A punishment had to be carried out. Somebody had to know how to do it. So the town kept him. In some places it gave him a house, but often not in the middle of ordinary neighborhood life. More the kind of place that solved a problem for everyone else. Far enough off that people did not have to keep passing his door. And once everybody knew where he lived, that was that. No blending in. No chance of just being another craftsman or another servant of the town. People knew his face because they had seen him at the moments they least wanted to imagine for themselves. Then they saw the same face on an ordinary Tuesday near a butcher's stall or crossing a square, and the whole mood shifted a little. Not a riot. Not a public scene every time. More the small stuff. A pause before handing him goods. A person stepping half a pace aside. A bench with room on it that somehow stayed empty next to him. If he went into a tavern, people could go quiet for a second, and then resume talking in that careful way that meant they were aware of him. If he touched money, some people took it without comment, and some looked as if they would rather not. If he reached for produce at a stall, the seller might deal with him quickly, without the usual chat. He had official business in town, but ordinary contact still felt contaminated to the people around him. So even a simple errand had this extra layer. Not just what he needed to buy, but who would serve him, how fast, and whether anyone made a show of keeping distances. Then the job itself kept feeding that reaction. People hear executioner and think only of the platform and the final blow, but that was just one part of it. A town did not keep a specialist, only for rare dramatic days. If there were prison punishments, interrogations under torture, bodily penalties, whipping, branding, handling corpses after judicial deaths, dragging away remains, dealing with the ugly work around punishment that nobody respectable wanted to put their own hands on, he could be the one called. So his routine moved through spaces most people avoided on purpose. A cell that smelled of damp straw and fear. A punishment room with ropes, irons, benches, hooks, wedges, whatever the local authorities used. Then the scaffold ground. Then afterward, when the crowd had had its look and started drifting away, there was still the body, the blood, the tools, the ropes, the wood underfoot, the clothing, whatever had to be removed, cleaned, cut down, hauled off, or secured. That part mattered for how people saw him. Officials relied on him exactly because he would do the things they did not want attached to themselves too closely. A magistrate could order. A clerk could record. Guards could keep the crowd back. A priest could attend to the condemned. But when there was a body to lift, a severed head to display, irons to fasten, a sentence to carry out with the hands and tools of another man, it went back to him. So he ended up associated not just with killing, but with all the physical residue around punishment. Blood on clothing, the smell after close work, stains on gloves or sleeves, knives, cords, axes, chains, hooks, saws, cart saws. Even if he washed, even if he changed, people knew what those hands did for a living. And because punishments were public, they knew it vividly. That made ordinary social life clumsy in a way that kept repeating itself. A shoemaker might spend the day making shoes and then just be a man at supper. The executioner finished work, but the work stayed on him in people's minds. He could leave the scaffold and still not really leave the scaffold. If he walked home, carrying tools wrapped in cloth, everybody knew what was under the cloth. If he sent for repairs to equipment, the blacksmith knew what he was mending. If wood had to be prepared for a platform, or a rope checked, or metal sharpened, there was no neutral version of the task. And the town paid him for this, or at least was supposed to. But pay did not solve much. In some places, he got wages. In some places, fees tied to particular acts. In some places, housing or rights to certain goods or clothing from the condemned or condemned. On paper, that could sound like compensation. In practice, it often meant his income was tied to the very work that made people recoil from him. It was not the sort of pay that turned into status. Nobody looked at his household and thought, respectable town servant, steady future. People could resent him and depend on him at the same time. That happened a lot. They knew the town spent money on him. They knew he received something for work everyone dreaded. If rights to clothes or belongings of the punished came with the office, that could add another layer of disgust. He was already the man of the scaffold, and now he was also the one who might legally take what remained after someone else's punishment. Useful rights maybe, if a household needed material to get by. But not the kind of thing that made neighbors feel easy around you. So his home ran on a narrow sort of practicality. Whatever he was owed had to be collected. Whatever clothing could be reused got reused. Whatever side duties were attached to the office got done, because the household needed them done. There was no room for pride in the nice public sense of the word. More the stubborn pride of keeping the place going when everyone wanted your labor but not your company. And that did not stop with him. His family got pulled into it almost automatically. The wife did not just marry a man with a rough job. She married into the mark that came with it. Neighbors knew whose house she kept. Other women at market knew whose children were hers. Ordinary little exchanges could stiffen before they even started. Someone might answer her, but not linger. Someone might trade, but not invite. Children notice these things faster than adults admit. They see which doorways they are not warmly welcomed at. They see which games they are left out of. They hear the names muttered after their father passes. Marriage became its own problem. A household already treated as tainted did not get easy access to ordinary marriage networks. Families thinking about a daughter's future did not usually look toward the executioner's house and think that looked promising. So the circle narrowed. Marriages were more likely within other excluded trades, other marginal families, other executioner lines, people already carrying some social stain, and therefore with fewer options themselves. That is how the job stopped being one man's burden and turned into a family condition. It shaped who came to the table, who did not come, who might marry in, who definitely would not, where people stood in church if they were allowed there, how children were spoken to, how quickly rumors stuck into. One punishment in the square could ripple right back into years of household life. Then, on top of all that, the work itself had to be done well. That was another pressure sitting on him all the time. A public execution was not just a legal act. It was a performance of order in front of the whole town, and if he mishandled it, the failure did not stay technical for long. It became public shame in the loudest possible setting. So before one of these events, there were practical checks. Tools had to be ready. An axe had to be in proper condition. A sword had to be maintained. Ropes had to hold. The scaffold had to be secure enough not to wobble like a badly built stall in front of everyone. Restraints had to be fitted. The condemned had to be positioned correctly. Guards, clergy, officials, and crowd all had their places. But at the center of the thing was one man whose hands had to perform under direct scrutiny. And that crowd was not gentle. They came to witness justice, but they also came to watch. They judged everything they saw. If he hesitated, they saw it. If his grip looked uncertain, they saw it. If he needed more than one blow where one should have done it, everybody saw it and reacted in real time. Murmuring, shouting, anger, revulsion, mockery, panic in some cases. A lawful sentence could turn into a messy, noisy scene, and the man everyone was already uneasy about suddenly became the obvious target for blame. Officials might have ordered the act, but the crowd did not have the magistrate's hands in view. They had his. So, Something went wrong. The failure attached to his face, his body, his reputation. And he still had to finish the work while people watched him struggle to recover control. That had a practical effect before the next event, too. One bad performance did not just embarrass him for an afternoon. It followed him into later errands, later punishments, later market days. People remembered. They repeated details. They exaggerated. The man who was already half shut out of ordinary social life could become the man everybody associated with botched killing, visible incompetence, or prolonged suffering on the scaffold. In a place where he was already feared, this did not make people more forgiving. It made them more hostile and more eager to avoid him, except when they had no choice. So imagine the position. On the very day, everyone in town is looking at you. Nobody wants to be in your place. Nobody wants to stand too close to you afterward. And if your hand slips, you may be hated even more than before. Then the event ends, at least for everyone else. The crowd starts to peel away. Some people keep talking as they walk. Some rush off to repeat what they saw. Some make the sign of the cross. Some act tough in front of others and then suddenly have no interest in remaining near the scaffold once the body is still. The officials leave when their part is done. The priest goes. The curious drift back toward shops and kitchens and workshops. He often stayed. That is another part people forget. The public moment was not the whole shift. Someone still had to manage what was left. Take down the body or secure it for display, depending on the sentence. Move remains. Clean tools. Deal with ropes. Handle clothing. Make the place usable again or leave it arranged as ordered. If there had been blood on the platform, that did not vanish because the legal sentence was complete. So the man at the center of the ceremony became, a few minutes later, the laborer working through the leftovers while everybody else returned to ordinary life. Then he had to walk back into that same ordinary life, carrying the fact of what he had just done. That is why the fear stuck to him personally. People did not just fear punishment in the abstract. They knew who prepared it, who delivered it, who touched the body after, who maintained the tools, who could be summoned again when another sentence came down. His face was familiar in the worst possible way. Not familiar like a baker everybody greets. Familiar like a storm-damaged tree people glance at every time they pass. And because he was so visible, anonymity was gone. A stranger might not know him at first, but in his own town people did this. Children knew. Stallholders knew. Servants knew. Gods knew. Housewives knew. He could not shed the office by changing his coat. He had stood at the center of the town's most charged public moments. That fixed him in everybody's memory. Then there was the problem of timing. A regular craftsman had a rhythm people understood. The executioner's household had interruptions. A summons could come because someone had been sentenced. A punishment day could be approaching. Preparation started. The whole house would feel it before he even left. Tools checked. Clothing selected. Transport arranged if needed. A wife or servant reading his mood and not asking unnecessary questions. Then after, the return home. Maybe with pay to collect, maybe with goods attached to the office. Maybe with stains that had to be scrubbed out before anything else. Even quiet days were not really detached from the next call. That was part of why neighbors stayed uneasy. The executioner was not just the man who had done unpleasant work once. He was the man who might be needed again next week. So each ordinary sight of him in town carried the reminder that punishment was a standing possibility in the same place everybody bought fish and cloth and ale. His family lived inside that rolling awareness too. They did not get to say, that event is over now. Not socially. If a daughter reached marriageable age, the office still sat at the table with her. If a son grew up, people assumed the stain might pass with the work. If the wife went out on market day after a public execution, she was not merely another woman shopping. She was from that house, and plenty of people would treat her that way before she had spoken a word. So the fear around the job was not built only from the moment of killing. It came from how the whole arrangement leaked into everything else. The town officially needed one man to do what nobody else wanted to do. To make law visible. To put hands on bodies. To use the tools correctly. To finish ugly tasks after respectable people had stepped back. And every one of those duties made him easier to recognize, harder to sit beside, harder to marry into, easier to blame, and nearly impossible to fold back into normal company. He could be on the town payroll and still have people edge away at the market. He could serve the court and still be kept at the edge of the social map. He could be needed by magistrates in the morning and treated like a contaminating presence by afternoon. Then another sentence would be posted, another crowd would gather, another scaffold would need checking, another set of tools would come out, and by evening he would still have to walk home through the same streets, with people making room for him without ever wanting to stand near him.